Hey everyone, how's it going? Welcome back to another video. I know there's no piece of paper here, but don't panic. This is a little bit of a different video as I am currently in the throes of working through chapter 2 or issue 2 of my webcomic, The Wizard of Westford. If you haven't read it, go click the link below and read it before watching this video because this is going to be definitely spoiler heavy, as this is a director's commentary, quote unquote director's commentary of issue 1, chapter 1 of the comic. I kind of want to do this just because one, I'm busy, and two, I thought it'd be a good way to kind of show you kind of page by page the process that I used to make the comic. Through each page that I show, I'll have a little image on the side of kind of the colored version of it and kind of just talk through, I guess, what I was thinking about when I made those pages, just the process of making it, and hopefully that helps you in your own comic making journey. And yeah, let's go ahead and get started. So we'll start off with the cover page of chapter 1, chapter 2. Also, if you see these two, I'm not sure if this is in the frame, but if you see these two pieces of tape, this is my super high-tech way of making sure that the pages of the comic stay in the frame of the video. So, but yeah, this is the cover of chapter 1. I'm gonna just call them chapters, issues, kind of same dealio here. I kind of want to do something simple with this. So it's really just Zemo's hat in a field of grass. Obviously, all of this is hand inked. For those of you that don't know and haven't really watched my videos before, I primarily ink traditionally, excuse me, and then color digitally. This just kind of is how I like to work. It allows me to separate the processes and have as much control and flexibility as I possibly can with the way I like to work. But really, with this page and artistically and kind of the composition of it, I guess, I really just wanted something simple. Like I said, it shows Zemo's hat, crystals, necklace around it, and in a flowing field of grass, which is very, I would say, iconic to, I don't know, the comic in general to me almost has this feeling of wind, and kind of like wind moving through grass. There's lots of like windswept scenes with leaves falling or grass literally blowing through the air. I kind of wanted the world and space to feel kind of constantly in motion. So that's kind of the thought process behind that. I'm pretty happy with how it turned out. I did go, I think, in chronological order for issue 1, and I still am with chapter 2. But yeah, I think this does a pretty good job of kind of just selling the feeling of the comic, and in my opinion. I'm really big on kind of show, don't tell, or I try to be as much as possible, and not being too expository, kind of letting the viewer and reader interpret and figure things out for themselves. So that's kind of what this is about. I kind of try and leave things fairly simple. I don't tend to want to use a lot of text and dialogue if I don't have to. So that's kind of what this is about. Let's go ahead and move on to first page. So the first page, kind of going off of that, is textless, or there's no dialogue in it. It's really just Crystal moving through the forest. I kind of wanted to start off this way as, in a way, the comic is about the Wizard of Westford, Zemo, but it's also really about her and her journey. And, I really wanted to show her first. She's the main character. I mean, there's two main characters, right? But typically in writing, at least how I was taught in film school, like you only really have one main character. And I think as I'm making the comic, she is the main character, sort of, but they kind of flip-flop. Zemo is very much the Gandalf or like wise teacher figure, sort of, or he tries to be. Also very imperfect as a character. She is very imperfect, but she really, I think, represents, if I'm being completely honest, like a little bit of like my anxiety in life, and kind of just the tendency to cover up and feel like, something you can't really control is on you, which I think is kind of what the Hagstone ends up representing. But I really like the way this turned out, inking wise. It was a great first page. It kind of gave me a lot of confidence to go through and make the other pages. This was the sketch of it. I don't really talk about sketching too much on the channel, but these first few pages I was making this way. I think I was sketching them and then inking them on a light table. But after this point, I thought that was dumb because I can just remove the red line in Photoshop. So I ended up doing that. But yeah, I really like the compositional flow. I kind of want to start a close up and kind of have her going through the forest. I always like to include little animals, so I included the deer. there as well. Going on to page 2, again, these get like better laid out as I figure out the comic making process, but you can really see this is me kind of learning to make comics as I go along, especially in this first chapter, or at least learning how I want to make them, because this is like, I would say the first time I've tried to make a comic traditionally, right? I've done some digital, kind of really small, almost like test comics in the past, but this is the real first one in my opinion. But kind of similar situation, I did a sketch and then inked it on a light table. I'll put this under just because this is prettier to look at, or to the side. Just a lot of establishing shots, kind of getting the vibe and feeling of the comic together. Again, no dialogue. Really wanted to keep it simple and just kind of let you interpret as the viewer, reader, the scene-to-scene action. Going on to page 3. This is where we get our first bit of dialogue, and really kind of shifts away from the girl in the forest at this point to Zemo. I, at this point in the comic, did not know how to letter well, and I still arguably don't. But it's something I'm kind of learning as I go. I'd never lettered before this comic, which may be very evident in some pages. I think I'm doing okay. This was lettered using a Micron, I think 0.2, but now I'm using a Flex Nib fountain pen, which for me I think is working much better. It gives more versatility in the line weight and stuff when doing the lettering. But this first bit of dialogue, I think I really wanted to just establish Zemo's kind of personality and his relationship with Daisy here. He's kind of, my initial thought of him was kind of supposed to be this almost like gruff old guy. Like the, I guess, elevator pitch of the comic is kind of like Logan meets Gandalf from Lord of the Rings, but Gandalf's also really nice, at least for the most part, but he's also very purpose-filled. So I kind of wanted to take those two personality types and kind of mash them together, and that's kind of how I got Zemo. Obviously with some more nuances in there of my own flavor. But yeah, that's kind of his character profile in my own head. And then Daisy is kind of his conscience, so to speak, a bit of his like Jiminy Cricket kind of. And also just kind of a bit of comic relief or fun companion type character. I also got a comment, I think, in one of the first videos I made on the comic on this channel of me hopping the 180 here. It was kind of purposeful, and you know, maybe it was the wrong choice, but I did want it to be a little bit kind of disorienting. I was okay with that, just kind of showing him walking to the left and then to the right. The purpose was so it flows here and then he's looking this direction. Your eye carries you down here and then back across. Eye flow and comic flow is a very big thing. Obviously that could have been accomplished with him going to the right. I might have made that decision differently now that I'm looking at it, but I'm still happy with it. I'm still happy with the way it turned out. And again, here with the wind themes, being windswept, very like open. I wanted to give this beginning portion of Zemo and kind of going into the next page here a very like Shire from Lord of the Rings type feel. Things are almost idyllic, they're very calm, peaceful, perfect, but things are still in motion, kind of blowing through. I really like doing pages like this where there's not a lot of dialogue, and just kind of showing and drawing like little scenes. I think just it says as much as the dialogue in my opinion, and also we're getting into the pages where I sketched on the same page as I inked. But yeah, I just really like these almost transition pages of people and characters kind of going through the world. And for those of you that don't know, the world is also my D&D world that I play in outside of, you know, in IRL life. This is also IRL, but you hopefully get what I'm saying. So, you know, there's a lot of, I guess, personal history with the world, and it's kind of cool bringing a comic into it. I'll probably do a world building video at some point and kind of tell you all more about it. I am working on a map as well for the world as well, especially going into chapter 3. I think it'll be more necessary to have that in there. And, you know, at the end of this, when I'm all putting it all together into the full finished comic or graphic novel or whatever, I'm going to put that map probably at the front. But as we're kind of going through this and learning things as I go and making things as I go, you know, hopefully that's okay that I'm adding the map later. Going into page 5 here, this is where Crystal and Zemo really run into each other, and it's kind of cool. You can kind of also see, I think, me getting more confident inking the comic, especially going to this next page. You can't see it, but it's like right over there. And just slowly adding more detail and more line confidence as well. Line confidence is really big. I mean, this page was pretty confident. But there's a lot of more like smooth shapes, really getting into a flow at this point, I felt, on page 5. I think this is really where the style, like the full style of the comic, starts to come through, kind of going forward to now. And now it's just more me, I guess, small improvements, so to speak. Yeah, this is Zemo kind of reaching his idyllic spot, coming up to watch the sunrise, very important to him, which hasn't really been revealed why yet. But he is surprised by Crystal kind of breaking his peace in his life, and he's kind of initially trying to get rid of her, and then she's kind of pushes back, knows his name, and he, going into page 6 here, if I can grab the paper, is like, where'd you find that? Put it away, you fool, it attracts. And then he kind of sees this hand creeping through, yells move down the hill as an ogre bursts through. And this is the kind of the first and only time so far in the comic that you guys have seen him cast a spell, which I thought was really cool. I thought it was important just to show his, I guess, power level at the beginning of the comic. And because, you know, he might be a wizard, but magic is also not the focus of the comic. I'm realizing, especially now being halfway through chapter 2, it's more the interpersonal relationship between Crystal and Zemo, and kind of how his worldly knowledge influences her journey, as I would say the core tenets of what the story's about. Magic is there when it needs to be, and as a kind of supporting character, as a force in the world, but it's definitely not the main character. You know, a wizard is much more, and a character is much more than just what they can do. It's also kind of what they know and who they are. And I think if you are as powerful as Zemo, you would, you know, you'd be using your magic a little bit more wisely. And you'll get to see, hopefully, just how powerful he is in chapter 2, or at least, you know, one of the ways. But I really like this scene, lots of motion. I think I would have added more background here on both of these panels. But beyond that, we're very happy with it. You can see also over here, I made some mistakes, had to use some whiteout to fix his little grasp there. Yeah, cool stuff. Going on to page 7. Continuing the fight, I think would have probably added more detail here in their path. But other than that, I really like the scene, lots of motion. It was really the first time I've ever drawn an action scene like this in a comic, like sequentially, or really in general. I've drawn action scenes before, but in this format, it was definitely a new experience. Just something different. The posing was very difficult, and I think I did pull it off fairly well, especially for a great first go at doing something like this. I really like the tree exploding. In the script, it literally said the tree explodes like a mortar strike. Here, I thought that the transition from this page to this page, I still feel is a little bit, maybe not unclear, but I think I could have made it smoother, specifically with the ogre's path. He essentially leaps down the hill, but I think it still works. Like, he catches up to them. The general storytelling, like, you get what happens, right? He gets there. He lands. Zemo says, "I'm too old for this." Crystal says, "Same." But she is younger and more spry, so she kind of brazenly charges in. Does pretty well, like starts stabbing him in the shoulder, and then he kind of flips her over his shoulder and slams her into the ground. I think I made this more brutal than it needed to be because realistically she probably would have had all the bones in her body broken from something like that, but it kind of also shows to the, I guess, silliness of it being a fantasy world. Like, she's an elf, she can take some hits. There's definitely some like D&D, I would say, BS-ery in the comic where, you know, people are taking mortal blows and just getting back up afterwards after they've slept, essentially. Because this does knock her out. I really like this panel, though, with the huge slam in the background. I think this is one of the best pages in issue 1. And then going into page 9 here, this is kind of where you get to see a glimpse of what Zemo can do. He kind of says, "Okay, ugly." And I really kind of want him, when he casts spells, to kind of transition to maybe himself when he was younger, because he is an old man, kind of past his prime, so to speak, but obviously can still do some damage. Kind of starts taking it more seriously. They kind of have a bit of a stare down here. Ogre's kind of looking both directions. So he's like, "Who you calling ugly?" That was a bit of a subliminal thing, I guess. The ogre realizes what he's doing, reaches off, he casts a spell, and then blasts him with ice in the finished page. Hopefully you can see on screen somewhere. This is a bunch of ice, and then he's bleeding onto the ice as he's been pierced through by it. Also, I think the action scenes in this issue, this is pretty much them, turned out really well. I think in the future I might want to make the panels just a little bit slightly more complex, but I do like the minimal complexity of the way I did it, just because with action you really have to pay attention to what the focal points of the scenes are, so you know it doesn't get too muddy and too washed out in a bunch of lines and be, you know, bullcrap. So I think I kept it simple, but also had a lot of detail in there. I think I would like to add a little bit more detail, but beyond that, I think it was, you know, thumbs up for me. And you can also see Daisy up here watching what's going on. It's important for me to always include where she is because the continuity with her can get a little dicey sometimes. Not because I forget to draw her, but just she's always going to be by Zemo's side, but also she's a squirrel, right? So, you know, she can die easily, right? So she has to kind of know to get into a safe spot and just be there if Zemo needs her or whatever that may be. Page 10. So we kind of do a hard cut here into Zemo's tower. Hopefully that came through. I think it did, just because it's the only piece of civilization you've seen so far. It starts with them pouring tea, that kind of waking Crystal up. And then Zemo starts to kind of lecture her, finds out why she's there. Honestly, I think the lettering on this page looks really good now that I'm seeing it like months later. I think I drew all these pages so far over the summer. So it's been a minute since I've seen it. Also an important thing, if you don't go back and look at your old art, you should, just because it kind of shows you how far you've come, and you kind of just look at it as the viewer does, I imagine. But I really like this. There's a lot of panels, a lot of dialogue. I hadn't really done a dialogue page like this before, but I think it turned out really good, really well. And yeah, I like the kind of over the shoulder. I really try and have almost a filmic, I guess, composition style to the way I do panels, like lots of over the shoulder shots going into close-ups, that kind of thing. As I said earlier in the video, I did go to film school, so I think a lot of that bleeds through into my composition and comic making. Some detail shots, which is I'm from Arlenthal, showing her elf ear, kind of subliminally showing you that shit's an elf city somewhere in the world. Yeah, hopefully this is helping. We're about halfway, a little over halfway through. We have 5 pages left. We'll go ahead and get on to the next one. So this goes into a bit of a flashback. So, as you can see, this is a mistake I make somewhat regularly. There is no dialogue on this page, and there is in the final. You're probably wondering, how'd you get that dialogue in there? And it was really annoying because I pretty much had to, and I'm grabbing 2 pieces of paper here, rewrite the dialogue, as you can see here, and then put it in post, or in Procreate. So I'll show you those pages here in a second, but this is kind of flashbacking to where Crystal is from. I kind of wanted some details to feel a little bit less clear. Like, this is her memory, right? And almost her mental dramatization, if that's a word, of the of what happened to her. So I really wanted these pages, and this is kind of also where I swapped from doing the panels traditionally to digitally. So as you can see, there's these little dots outside that I used to, in Procreate, basically draw lines, connect the dots between to make the panels, just so they're perfectly straight. But anyways, yeah, this is kind of her almost mental dramatization of what happened. Some of these for her, I would say, are like one-to-one memories, like remembering her father leave, and then seeing her father, wounded in bed next to Gallant, who I've touched on so far in the comic, but we really get into more, I think, later in the story. Even after chapter 2, he's much more of a issue chapter 3 to 4, the end of the story kind of character. But I wanted to introduce him early just to show he's kind of part of it. He is a cleric. But yeah, so her father goes in, fights the goblins, gets hurt, and she's like, oh no, what do I do? And I like this big kind of sprawling action scene. I like the kind of almost panoramic nature of it in the vineyard, is where it's supposed to be located. I think it flows really nicely from this guy stabbing this guy in the chest, Crystal's dad running through, this guy chopping a goblin head off, and then the arrow firing into her dad. You kind of see what happens, which is obviously important. Yeah, I think this is laid out pretty well, in my opinion. You can tell what the important thing with comic pages, to go off of this, and kind of a benefit of me forgetting the dialogue, is you can tell what happens without the dialogue, right? You want to always be able to tell that as much as possible. I think the only exception to that is a conversation scene, because obviously you don't know what they're saying. But still, even by expressions and things like that, and maybe even framing of the panels, like, you want to be able to at least get a feeling or a vibe, right? If your comic can't do that, I would say redraw your page if possible. That's my opinion. But here's the dialogue, inking, and this is actually from the first page and page 5 and page 6 when I was using Micron still, for at least for page 1, and then I think I just didn't like the way page 5 and 6 were lettered, but now it looked fine after the fact, so I think I was just in my own head, I guess. And then this is page 11's dialogue here that I forgot to put in. Going into page 12. This is where Crystal kind of starts to narrate. You get kind of an image of the hag or the witch. This is, I would say, more the memory of what Crystal thought she looked like. I kind of wanted this almost to feel dreamlike in the way that Crystal remembers it, because after this point she does take the necklace off. You see something happens, her eyes change, and then she wakes up, her father is dead. I think in the final I said my father ... and then it didn't say ripped to shreds, but he was ripped to shreds. I thought this did a pretty good job as well of just kind of showing what happens. Show don't tell, just showing with images, and then the dialogue supports it is the goal. I really like this eye change and then her approaching the camp. I think overall this first issue is much better than I remember it. Good job me. I think I also, no, I like it how it is. I was gonna say I might have wanted to add more background on these three, but I think I like the color that I put in the back. I think that's what aids it to be feeling more dreamlike in the final. Going into page 13, we get to Zemo here. You can see I was gonna draw his beard in the background. I kind of wish maybe I did. But the angle of where his beard was and his arm coming in like halfway through his head, or maybe like his shoulder would have been up like way higher, like almost coming out of his ear for his arm to be there. So that doesn't really work, or his, arm bent in some weird way. So I just ended up doing the hand placing the teacup down on the table. Crystal clearly distraught and sad, and then Zemo kind of comforting her, and also kind of you can see him kind of putting things on, getting ready. I left myself a couple little notes here. Like make his hand bigger. Here too, like his hands are super tiny. So I ended up increasing those in Procreate and Post. And then she's distraught, but it goes through him getting ready and then him offering her sword back, saying like, let's go do this thing. I really like this last panel on the bottom here. I think it is very iconic, kind of shows a lot of emotion and feeling of really what's happening to Crystal without even the dialogue being here. I think this is probably one of the biggest wins of issue 1. And this is the second to last page, where this is essentially the call to adventure for Crystal and Zemo, where Zemo says, you know what, screw it, let's do this, I'm gonna help you out. And Crystal's like, wait, what? And then she kind of goes running after him. I really like this, where her foots and cape are still left here, and it cuts right into this panel. Daisy kind of teasing Zemo, and Zemo being like, meh. He does this face when he's kind of annoyed, and talking about Daisy, and then insulting Crystal, which I always think is funny, of Zemo's character. He's very, very, very sassy guy. Her eyes kind of look weird here. I probably would have done that a little bit differently, but that's okay. And then this is the last page with them kind of off on the adventure. The first issue is very much like things getting started, lots of just showing who the characters are, setting the scene, so to speak. And then issue 2 is more of a little bit more of that, I would say, going into the meat of the story. But I think we're getting into the meat with the pages I'm currently working on. And yeah, I hope this helped you out. I hope you enjoyed it. Hopefully it wasn't too disjointed. I've never done something like this, so hopefully it just kind of shows you a little bit of how the cake is made. I hope this doesn't look like it's a ton of hard work. I mean, it is a lot of hard work, but also, I just want to say, like, at the end of the day, it's grabbing a piece of paper, sketching, inking, and then scanning into a computer and coloring. Like, it's 4 steps. It looks like a lot, maybe, especially when you put it all together like this. Like, there's a thick stack. Hope that probably was out of focus, but it is doable. Like, if you're going to do something like this, I highly recommend you do it in chunks. Like, I typically will do anywhere from 1 to 3 pages a week, and it's definitely keeping me on schedule of finishing this thing by next summer, which is my goal. And yeah, just, I would say, just the TLDR of what I just said is, do this in pieces, right? Don't try and eat the whole elephant at the same time, right? Do it little by little, and eventually you'll have a comic. Whether it's 10 pages, 100 pages, 1,000 pages, you'll get there, right? It is a marathon, not a sprint. Do it at your own pace, at your own time, which is something I'm not very good at. Sometimes I try to rush, but don't do that. Don't be me. Do your own thing, stay at your own pace, and you'll be finished in no time if this is a project you're working on, or really any project. But yeah, thanks for watching. Subscribe if you liked it, like it if you liked it, and I'll see you when I see you.